and equated the earth with light. Why? Are there really pillars that cannot be seen?
Or is it an unseen pillar?
Everything is running, but the relationships are fixed.
Yes.
So that it would appear to people as if nothing is running, you see. We are destroying our environment with our own hands. And that's why the Quran says, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, we're back. You're watching Lifting the Fog and removing the misconceptions, misunderstandings, and misrepresentations about Islam and what it teaches. I'm your host, Yusuf Estes. We were talking in the earlier segment about the subject of the attacks, the harsh treatment that people have presented toward the Qur'an, the holy book in Islam. What we discussed was some of the miracles of the Qur'an, some of the evidences that the Qur'an itself couldn't be from a human being, but rather it had to be from some other source. And now particularly we want to deal in this segment with the word Qur'an itself. We spoke about this already, that the Qur'an means that which is being recited. I want to mention that sometimes when you translate, and very often when you translate, you can't get exactly the meaning of what you want. But particularly if a language is very rich in a particular subject, which the other language doesn't support, then you're forced to substitute words that really don't carry the right meaning. Such is the case in English, which, by the way, is a very good language when you're talking about a lot of the material things of the world. But when you discuss the depth of the subject of Islam, the Arabic language is so rich and so powerful that only the Arabic of the Qur'an can handle these words, the meanings that go with it. To give you an example, the very first word that comes in the Qur'an was revealed to Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, while he was in a sabbatical, in a cave. He was in a retreat. He was fasting. He was praying. And in the night, called Laylatul Qadr, the night of power, the angel Gabriel descended down and came to the cave where he was. And the angel embraced him and then ordered him in the Arabic language. He gave him a command, Iqra. When he said Iqra, immediately the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was understanding, you want something from me, I have to do something. The translators very often use the word read. But as we'll see in this segment, that doesn't really convey the message of what was being said here. Because, unfortunately, when people translated it this way, some of the successive folks in the English language that come along later said, well, this is an indication here. Muslims need to get an education, learn how to read and write, go to a university, get a degree, and become a PhD, and that's all from this word Iqra. It's not true. For sure, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never did learn how to read and write, so if that was an order there, he never did do it. In fact, it's something even more profound. It is to do what? Recite. Recite, because it says, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq, Iqra wal rabbuka akram, alladhi alamu bil kalam, alam al insana malam yalam. Trying to give you a little translation to the plus minus the English now. Here is an order that's coming from Allah Almighty through the angel Gabriel to Muhammad, telling him, recite. The response, he says, is, I'm not of the reciters. La ana bikari. Then it's repeated, Iqra, again. And then again, Iqra. And then finally, the verse that you just heard. To the English, more or less, I believe it would be better to say, he was being ordered, recite. In the name of your Lord, who created mankind from a leech-like clot of blood. I want to stop for a minute and let you know about this word alaq, because that's the name of the chapter or surah, the blood clot, or alaqa. What's happening here is a description of something that nobody could have known about 1400 years ago, because it's only through a special type of microscope and a way to look inside of a mother when she conceives inside of her womb this baby, because the egg is fertilized and as a zygote attaches and becomes an alaq hanging on the wall of the uterus. Nobody knew this until just in the last century. And that's using equipment that wasn't even thought about being invented back then. And alaq also means a leech. And that's exactly the shape of that little tiny baby under a microscope when he first formed. It looks more like a leech than a human. Plus, he is sucking the blood right out of the mother the same exact way that a leech does. But that's not all. It forms a clot of blood. It looks like a leech, but it's also something which clings. And it's interesting that when you have, I don't know if you have, like my house, we have a refrigerator. On the front of the refrigerator door are all these magnets hanging there. This would be correct in Arabic to call them alaqs because of the way they're clinging and hanging there. Now, if you think about this, how could somebody describe that in the very first statement coming in the Qur'an? But let's get back to our main subject and listen to the rest of the translation. Allah said He's created mankind from an alaq. Then He continues by saying, recite, and your Lord is most generous, who taught man how to use a pen. And He taught man what he doesn't know. This is an amazing statement coming to us from our Creator. And He's telling us that He created us in the first place. He's the one who's generous to us. And He is the one who's taught us what we didn't know. I want to mention something else here about the Qur'an. It doesn't come like the book that's written by a human being. Whenever I write anything or you write anything, we're talking about events that take place. We have a tendency to always write them in what's called chronological order. And that, what we're talking about here is the way things happen, the sequence. First, this, then that, and then so and so. And that's chronological order. And this is normal human beings. In the beginning, so and so and so, then so and so and so. But the Qur'an comes in a way that can be picked up and you could read it anywhere. You can open it in the middle, in the back, in the front, and read. You can recite Qur'an from any standpoint and enjoy it and take benefit from it and not feel like you missed something in the previous chapters. So this again indicates it's coming from somewhere other than human beings. The fact that many times, myself included, people have picked up the Qur'an and just opened it and said, oh, there's the answer to what I was looking for. This is something where the Qur'an is talking to us. Even the big scholars in Islam will tell you, and they've memorized the Qur'an cover to cover. They will say, though, there are times when I open it up and it just speaks to me, and I read something that I've read all my life, and suddenly I understood a meaning that I didn't know before. And this is the only book like it. But now I want to come to another point. The memorization of the Qur'an. Here is something that, I don't know if you know a lot about memorizing things, but if you even memorize one page of something, that's an amazing thing. Just to memorize a page of anything. Not big, not the telephone book, just a book. Pick up a book and try to memorize word for word. And have somebody hold the book on you, and you recite and see how close you could get. And see how many years it takes you to memorize 2 or 3 pages just to be able to do it. And then imagine this. The Qur'an came at a time when memorization and recitation was the big thing of the Arabian Peninsula. And people of that time were astounded and amazed by such a recitation as this. It didn't compare to anything they knew. The companions of Muhammad, peace be upon him, heard what he recited. They in turn memorized it completely. And then they in turn memorized and helped those in next generations to do the same thing. By reciting and memorizing, Muslims today have achieved the same as Muslims in those days. the ability to hear and recite, and even if they hear somebody recite incorrectly, to catch it and say, oh wait, that's a mistake. The leaders, or imams for the Muslims, stand in front of the prayer and they recite from the Qur'an in several of our prayers every day. While they're reciting, if they make a single mistake, even a tiny mistake, there are those behind them who can catch it and let them know that they need to repeat that. What other book do we know like this? And by the way, when we talk about the memorization of the Qur'an, some people estimate there are approximately 1.5 billion Muslims on the earth today. And I will assure you, if they're Muslims and they pray, they know by memory at least a portion of the Qur'an, even though 80% of all the Muslims today are not Arabs. They don't speak Arabic language, but they've memorized this Qur'an to some extent, at least, in the Arabic language. Every single Muslim on earth knows how to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the first statement in the Qur'an. And almost every single one, if they pray, I guarantee you, they know in Arabic the first chapter of the Qur'an, the whole first chapter. Every member of the Islamic faith. But that's not all. Listen to this. There are so many today who have memorized the entire Qur'an that we cannot count them. Imagine that. There are over 6,320 verses in the Qur'an, more than that. Yet, over 10 million human beings walking on this earth today have memorized it exactly the same way. Letter for letter, word for word, sentence, paragraph, page, and chapter complete. Just as it was recited by Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, so is it recited and memorized and passed on today. What other work of literature, of prophecy, of science have we seen in the history of mankind that compares to the Qur'an? We invite you to explore for yourself, to learn more about the Qur'an, the truth about the Qur'an, and the truth about Islam and what it stands for. Let us work together to remove this fog. Let's lift the fog and find the real truth about Islam, the Muslims, Allah, and the Qur'an. Until next time, this is Yusuf Estes reminding you, it's only Allah that guides, and may He guide all of us to the truth. Ameen.